Yeah, so next speaker is Icebreaker 1, Gavin, which is the winner of the Modernizing Energy Data Access competition, and they will be talking about open energy. And we will also hear from Alex in their collaboration with Icebreaker 1. So Gavin, if you want to share your screen, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Can you see okay there?
Yes.
Super. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gavin Starks. I'm the founder of Icebreaker 1, and we're really delighted to be part of the MEDApps program. It's very much a groundbreaking program, I think, when we look at what's happening around the world. Our role here was, as Icebreaker 1, is to try and accelerate net zero, so using data to accelerate journey towards direct investment and action towards net zero, and open energy was one of the lead programs that we've been developing over the last couple of years. The underlying challenge here is that the energy system itself, we've mapped out over 8,000 organizations in the UK that are related to the energy sector. And as the whole sector digitalizes, as we've seen from the EDIP report, there will be millions of systems in that ecosystem with thousands of providers, including aggregators, analysts, and so on, as well as of users. And so when you look at this map, it looks very much similar to the web. So the question there is, how can we build a web of energy data and link that together with the policy and regulatory environments, and link that to the investment communities who are trying to pull together funding to invest in our net zero future. I think one of the big challenges here is that trying to deal with a huge number of different stakeholders, you end up with lots of fragmented projects. So one of the some big challenges we were trying to address was how far you've got to go together, and created a number of advisory groups and steering groups which were represented across industry, with hundreds of people engaged throughout the program to help define what the actual needs were. I think one of the things we've learned in this process is that there's a very broad maturity curve in terms of the data maturity of the sector, but there's a huge amount of ambition to say, how can we make better use of the information flows that we are starting to create. But really the kind of first order challenge was to say, how can we even make the data discoverable in the first place? So there we worked with industry to say, well, what mechanisms do you need in order to make the data discoverable? And so one of the first things that we built here is just, might seem quite straightforward, but it didn't exist. It's a search engine for energy data. But this is a search engine that searches not just open data, but what we call shared data. So that's commercially relevant information that can't necessarily be open and free for use by anyone. Underpinning this is the fact that most of the really valuable data is locked behind a firewall somewhere and needs to be licensed in some way. And so here, the search engine, the first point is to enable the discovery of what data have we got in the country. And especially as the not just the energy sector needs access to more information, but the users include local councils, the users include the water industry and the transport sector, as everyone is trying to move towards more decarbonized power and electricity in particular within that. So here the first order problem was unlocking data discovery, but instead of having a process where people had to upload their data to a portal or to some kind of centralized service, so well, let's copy the principles of the web and say, publish your metadata, the data that describes the information you have. You can publish the metadata in an open format, and that lets the search engines discover the information that you've got and index it and make it then searchable via Open Energy. The process, though, means that everybody else can also index that data. So we've seen with other data portals that have come into existence, like UKPN, where they've published the open metadata, we can index them and they can index us. So this is not about centralizing, it's about federating the discoverability of the information in the first place. So there, the search results, if you're publishing open data, then the service just links directly to that. There's no registration or anything like that in the middle of the process. It's exactly as you would imagine with the open web. When we get to the piece where the data needs to be restricted in some way, however, there's an access control process here. And this is something where we've borrowed heavily from the open banking standards, which we were involved in the development of some years ago. And we've basically refactored that service for the energy sector. So here there's a mechanism for a data provider to basically certify themselves and say that, you know, go through a form of know your customer, a KYC process to say who they are and that they can authenticate themselves to that. And then as a data user wants to come on board, they can say, well, we want to have access to that data, but the data supplier can have the consent, can manage that sort of consent process. So here the data publisher is in control of the data supply to potential customers. And what we're trying to do in the middle of this is start to standardize the licensing conditions and the technology and security protocols and so on. But again, the data doesn't sit with Open Energy, it sits with the data owner. And what the access control component does is manage that consent process and effectively securely connect the open APIs between the different vendors. So if you're a data supplier and you've got an API on your data, the authentication process of giving somebody else access to your system is something that we can reduce down to a couple of clicks. And so when we look at how this needs to work at a market scale, reducing that consent management process down to as small a process as possible, as low friction a process as possible is really critical, rather than the process at the moment where a lot of data is either not shared because people don't know it exists, or that it takes months to negotiate the data licensing agreements. But again, all of these things are wrapped into what we call a trust framework. And this is where we're bringing together public sector and private sector to say what really are the industry needs, effectively what are the user needs, how can we prioritize that, a series of advisory and steering groups there to help develop what could be a standard for data sharing across the market. Again, it's not just about technology, it's about the operational processes, the legal frameworks, the policy frameworks. They then get rendered to the market through search and access control, but these things are co-designed by the market. Icebreaker One is an independent nonprofit, and this is a critical design feature in what we're doing. Is if we were a for-profit company, we'd end up likely competing with somebody that we want to be in the trust framework. So there's a very thin layer here that we're trying to enable to unlock market-wide interactions. To boil this out into just 5 points of what does the trust framework embody? Well, first of all, we're trying to create common rules across the market for how data can be shared and what the mechanisms for that. We would embody in the word cohesive. And then common processes to make sure that the data is interoperable, and that goes down into data standards, into API standards, and so on. But again, we're not trying to necessarily define these from scratch. There's plenty of prior art out there. Mostly this is about the industry coming together and saying, here are things that are already working or that we're already developing. How can we put them into the trust framework and make that easy for people to engage with in a business context? Which is point 3 here, is framework data rights. So we're working with organizations like Alexon, you'll hear from in a moment, on how they can do framework legal agreements and provide the basis for this consent management process. So it's got to be secure, it's got to be controlled, and it's got to be universal. It's got to be open to the whole market. So there are 5 pillars, if you like, of activity that underpin the development of open energy. And we're very excited again to be moving this forward. Looking forward, we've just come out of pilot phase this year. We're in a sort of version 1 standards development process here, trying to onboard organizations. And if you'd like to get involved, please just get in touch with us. It's still kind of early days. As you can see, this is not it's not going to be a short project. It'll take many years to get this really cemented into the sector. But again, we're really excited about being able to bring this to market and actively seeking collaborations. So if I pause there and pass to Elexon, then they can talk more to their specific examples.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Hopefully you can all hear me. So yeah, thanks, Gavin, and good morning, everybody. As you've heard, Elexon has been working with Icebreaker One to become a data supplier on their open energy platform, and we currently have some of our open data available on there. I currently work in the analysis and insight team. The team collects, consolidate, and visualize our data and information for you, adding value through insight reports and forecasts. So we also help our data users keep up to speed and help with any day-to-day queries that these users might have. So we're delighted to have joined forces with Icebreaker One, helping revolutionize the way data is shared across industry and the energy sector to make sure the UK achieves its net zero goals. The initial collaboration between our organisations has integrated 10 datasets from the new Elexon Connect Insight solution with Icebreaker One's open energy platform. The available data initially includes open datasets that provide a forward view of electricity availability, from generation to interconnector capacity, as well as historic views on electricity generation and fuel mix. This will allow data consumers to build a picture of where GB electricity has and will be coming from, using the datasets exposed on the Icebreaker One open energy platform. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Gavin and Tim Workoven for helping us get set up on that platform. It's been a pleasure working with them over the past few months. So before I jump into our partnership, I thought I'd say a few words on who Elexon are and the data we have available to provide to industry. So for those who don't know, Elexon helps keep Britain's electricity market running smoothly. So we manage the Balancing and Settlement Code, which is one of 11 major codes governing Britain's energy system. The BSC, so the Balancing and Settlement Code, contains rules, data and commercial arrangements, which, among other things, make trading possible and help National Grid keep the lights on. So we're responsible for the imbalance settlement process, which is the payments process that takes place after National Grid have balanced supply and demand across the GB electricity system. So we make sure. Sorry to interrupt you, Angus. Just in case you have slides, you're not sharing them. Sorry, I don't have any. Yeah, perfect. So no slides from me. I'm just here to say a few words on our partnership. If that's okay. So we are responsible for the imbalance settlement process, which is the payments process that takes place after National Grid take balancing actions to balance the system, matching supply with demand in each half hour. So we make sure generators and consumers are paid or pay for the energy they use in a settlement period, including any of those balancing services that National Grid might take. So currently the settlement process takes around 14 months with a disputes window for any corrections after those 14 months. And to perform this process, Elexon collects and has access to a wealth of data, both instantaneous and historic. Our real-time data is published on the BMRS, Balancing Mechanism Reporting Service, and our new Connect Insight solution, which is sort of an upgraded version of that BMRS, and we're moving all our data onto that upgraded system. We also have a lot of historic data, which is published mostly on our Elexon portal and Elexon website. We feel our data is extremely valuable to the ever-changing energy industry in supporting innovation and improvements in operation. We are always looking for better ways to engage with energy data users and constantly exploring new avenues to provide our data. So this is where the Icebreaker One team and the Open Energy Platform came in to help us reach and engage with our consumers more. So our data is available through various repositories, and we're building up our profile on the Open Energy Platform. But there are three overarching features that make our data unique and valuable. The first being that we provide system-wide data at a high level of detail, so you can see activity on the GB electricity system from fuel type or whole system demand, all the way down to an individual asset or unit's activity. So this supports in-depth modeling, forecasting, and enables more efficient market operation. And it also identifies, also helps the identification of opportunities within the market. So we aim to provide all our data, well, we look to provide all our data to be free and used without restriction. So trying to incorporate the open data principles. We already make a significant amount of our data free under an open data license through that balancing mechanism reporting service, which is the best source for tracking the electricity wholesale market in near real time. And as mentioned, we're working on supplying as much of our data as possible in this way through the Connect Insight solution. Our data is also trusted and integral, so our balancing mechanism reporting service has over 5 million daily requests via API and via manual download on the website. And Elexon are trusted to deliver this data, which is essential information for the electricity industry and its various stakeholders. So working with Icebreaker One and our partnership, as the energy industry has evolved and develops new products, systems and services to meet net zero targets, we will all increasingly rely on data and data insights. This will mean higher volumes of data running through industry systems, more market participants interacting with that data. It's essential that this data is both open and securely managed in order to facilitate levels of innovation and change that the industry needs. With that backdrop, Elexon has been working hard to make as much of its data on the GB system open, and the platform gives a great opportunity for the consumers of our data to quickly search and find our data. So the tags on our data sets and the industry standard metadata make our data easily searchable, discoverable, and understandable, fulfilling recommendations from the Energy Data Task Force. The platform also allows us to make our more traditionally published data sets more discoverable and available. So some of our more historic data might be available in a manual CSV download, and consumers can now search and find these historic files on the Open Energy Platform. So we think this infrastructure and this searchability is vital for the modern energy industry stakeholder to develop their systems, apps and analytics that will revolutionize the sector and push towards those net zero goals. For now, we've exposed open data endpoints on the Open Energy Platform, which offer the most up-to-date data on the GB electricity system, helping industry participants make their trading decisions and understand market dynamics. The JSON files on the platform have a focus on generation with forecasts, outturn generation, and outage data available. I think one of the greatest features of the platform is being able to search for these data sets and also having any related data sets from around industry visible to give users a rich repository of energy data that best suits their needs. So from this point, we're now that we've been fully integrated and established on the platform, we do look at making more of our data available on the platform as we develop our new Connect Insight solution and push for more open data sets. This will potentially include some shared data sets, and we're looking into the infrastructure and setting up access to that feature, in addition to providing the essential market data in an open way. We also look to providing essential expertise to companies and innovators working with Icebreaker One, helping them understand the use and make use of Elexon's wealth of data on the wholesale electricity industry as they develop new products and services. So I just wanted to come and speak to you guys today and just say we've had a great experience launching on the platform, and we're looking forward to developing our profile and making the best use of all the features that the platform has available to give better value to our data for our consumers. So that's it from me today. I think I'll hand back to either Gavin or Fabio.
Great, thank you, Angus. Thank you very much, and thank you, Gavin, for an excellent presentation. So I will invite all the attendees to write their questions in the chat. We have now roughly 5-10 minutes for discussion, for Q&A. I will start with one question that is related to the discussion in the chat. So we know that there is a proliferation of bespoke data licenses now in the sector. So my question to Gavin is, what is your approach to trying to standardize licenses?
That's the core question here that I think is the biggest challenge for the whole sector. Our observation is that this tends not to be a technology problem, although there's lots of technology work to be done. There's a lot of legacy tech out there and so on. But the really challenging stuff is making sure that we can access and use, or find access and use the data. So the approach that we've taken, and this is where there's substantial and material differences from open banking. With open banking, we had quite narrow use case around access to bank accounts and things like that. With energy, obviously, there are thousands of use cases. And so the challenge there is to work out how is that even possible? And the approach we've taken here is you could start with a very top-down approach and say, well, look, let's try and create some generic templates here and then see if test the applicability. We're doing elements of that, but the far more useful approach is actually to pick a use case and drill through that use case. And we've been working with Elexon and with SSE and others here to say that what are the actual needs here? What are the business needs? What are the engineering needs? What are the commercial needs? And get all the different people in a room together and say, look, what's going to be fit for purpose for this application? And then how can we instrument that? My experience, again, generally over decades now, has been all companies think that their data is incredibly valuable when they want to have 100% control over where that data goes and what the commercial terms are. But actually underneath that, there's a set of common parameters, if you like, a common set of dials where you can create restrictive uses or the parameters for utilization around that based on the sensitivity of the data. And so there's a lot of work that's been done on a thing called data sensitivity classes, which define different types of banding for the data, and those then can inform what's fit for purpose at the legal end. So I think your question hits the right nail on the head there, is that's the hardest piece of work. However, there is a process now that we can apply to work through that on a case-by-case basis and then look at what can be generalized. Only one thing to add to that is we don't set the price. If companies want to charge each other for the data, that's something that's up to them. So that, again, we're trying to enable a commercial ecosystem here rather than get in the way of it. What we learned through open banking was there are certain types of data that do need to be shared across the whole market, but you don't want to share it outside of the market. So there's a reciprocity effectively where everybody would charge each other the same amount to get access to certain types of information. And at that point, you just move it to marginal costs and don't treat it as a revenue center for a defined ecosystem. And this is one of the things that the access control and trust framework can enable, is say within this cluster of organizations, we're not going to charge each other for the data, but we're going to enable the data to flow. But as soon as you go outside of that, then there can be more commercial rules applied. So lots of work to be done there, but we've got the framework to push this forward.
Thank you, Gavin. Very comprehensive answer. Thank you. That's great. Another question that I have is there any collaboration opportunity for instance, the attendees, in case they wanted to engage more with you, with this collaboration that has been between you and Alexon, and in general with Open Energy?
Absolutely. No, we've got a continuous open call for participation, and please get in touch with us. It's just Open Energy at icebreaker1.org or via the websites. I think here, as I suggested or indicated on my roadmap here, this is not a short journey. You know, it took the banking sector while we generated the first version of the written standard in a very short period of time, and it was then regulated. It took years to get it to market at scale, and our expectations are that's also going to be the case here. However, the way to accelerate this is to show the value. And the more people can come to us with a use case, particularly some of the MEDApps users who are looking for access to information, quite often the data doesn't exist where you think it does. You know, a lot of the DNOs, for example, get data requests that they say, well, we don't have that data either. What we've also learned is, you know, the data can come from completely different areas. So weather information, for example, may sit with the Met Office or other organizations. So bring us the use cases and we can start to build collaboration around them, look at the data value chain, get people in a room together, work that through, and then try and codify it.
Great. Thank you, Gavin. And just one short question there. You mentioned DNOs. Do you have any data at the moment from distribution network operators? Do you have on Open Energy?
Sure. Well, we're just working with SSE on some of the use cases there. One of the primary use cases as well that was developed through the advisory groups was looking at EVs and flex markets and heat pumps. So it's the kind of, again, the beginning of the journey, I would say, in many ways, but we have got the data coming through those processes. As I mentioned as well, we're also indexing now other sources like the UKPN networks, and they can do vice versa. So the key here is looking at really what the data maturity curve is for a lot of these organizations. You've got the need to start publishing the existence of data in the first place so that it can be discovered. And that's, you know, part one, as Alexon have now done. Part two is then saying, like, what are the specific licensing conditions? But all of those things are best driven through use cases. So again, it comes back to, if you've got startups are quite often way out there saying, oh, we've already built the AI systems. All we need is all of the data from these different systems and we can feed our AI. And industry is kind of sitting there kind of going, well, we've got pockets of information, but it may exist in a CSV file over there, maybe locked in a legacy system over there. And there's a huge process that has to happen inside some of the DNOs and other large incumbents, just because they've been existing at scale for a long time. There's a lot of technical debt. But again, the use case here helps to bring it to life. I think we find the approach, if you go into an organization and say, well, just open up all your data, their immediate response is, well, why? So let's start with why. Let's pick the use case, drill through that, and then we can do that. And that's, we're working with the DNOs as well on that.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you. So really a call for use cases here. So yeah, if I
add into that as well, because I just noticed in the chat about the international dimension. So we're part of a global group called Mission Innovation. And that's was a group set up to deliver the Paris agreements. And the energy component of that is co-chaired by China, Italy, and the UK. So BEIS is the secretariat there. Open energy is part of